development of psychedelics within an institutional and biomedical paradigm is incredibly important to this movement overall. But then to think that the buck stops there, to think that science is complete without a science and study of just the phenomena of consciousness generally, to think that they should only be available in these incredibly tightly regulated sorts of settings, and not because plants should be free and it's a crime against humanity that they're not.
So yeah, let's start by telling me who you are, so anyone who hasn't heard of your work or hasn't watched the podcast, who are you? And we'll start there.
Well, so I think that the way I normally introduce myself is Dr. Ben Malcolm, psychopharmacology consultant, psychedelic educator, and founder of Spirit Pharmacist. And I think that those are all really huge and appropriate sort of labels or part of my identity. But truly, I am also a musician, I'm an artist, I'm a single father, I'm a person that tries to live the mission with the highest level of integrity and alignment possible. And that certainly doesn't mean that I'm not fallible and have flaws and things like that, because I think that's just part of being a human overall. And so I think given that we're outside the typical kind of containers and things that I'm giving these interviews in, it also feels really appropriate to talk about some of those other labels or to introduce myself that way. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm coming to know you better as a colleague, but a friend, one of the things that I learned about you that we didn't really get into in the podcast is you were an all-American swimmer and a badass, and you can run a mile in under 5 minutes too, which is, I don't know anyone actually in my life that can run a sub 5-minute mile. And so that fascinated me when I learned that about you recently. So how do you think being an all-American athlete and the discipline that took and like the sacrifice, like how has that informed what you do today?
Well, I think it was just an absolutely critical piece of my upbringing in so many ways overall. And I mean, I think that particularly being a competitive swimmer, right, you are really following a black line on the bottom of the pool most of the time. You know, there are relay races, and so it's somewhat of a team sport if you've got persons around you and you swim relays, but it's also a really individual type of sport in a lot of ways as well. And I think that, I mean, it really kept me on a straight path many times, where I think there was a lot of outside forces growing up, maybe in North America, in cultures that were just frankly like less than healthy overall. And there was something about that always kept me centered, that kept me focused, and really gave me something to work towards. You know, it was about my freshman year in high school when it was a close friend I had at the time, you know, said, you know, maybe you want to think about swimming in college, and maybe you want to think about going to this university, University of California at Santa Barbara. And he showed me a flyer of it, and it was right on the beach, and there was this grove of eucalyptus trees. And I had grown up in Tasmania, Australia. That's where I was born. And I actually moved to the US right at the end of 5th grade, right before starting middle school, which is probably just like a difficult time to be transplanted generally overall. And there was something about that just felt like such a nice hybrid between really my roots and where I was born, and then where I was, you know, had landed and didn't necessarily have a lot of wiggle room or choice in that overall. And so I really put my mind to it, or decided at the age of 15 that I got 4 years till the end of high school, and this is the opportunity that I have to get myself in a position to set myself up for the type of path and the type of future that I really wanted. And so there was something about particularly those 4 years and the hard work and dedication and the sort of like focus that I put into that goal-oriented sort of behavior, and then achieving it, right? Actually going to UC Santa Barbara on not a full but a partial ride as far as a swimming scholarship, and it's a Division I men's swimming program that really like implanted early that if you put your mind to a goal, even if it seems far off in the future, and kind of chunk it down into steps and stay with it and dedicate yourself and work hard, it can happen and you can achieve it. And I think in a lot of ways that set me off with this proof of concept or belief system that no matter what I wanted to do in life, as long as I kept that focus, then there was a really high degree of probability that I was either going to get there or get to something really close, or maybe even get to something better, right? So yeah, I think that's, I could probably go on and on, but that's really how I think being an athlete translated into maybe in the path in higher education and graduate studies and, becoming a professional psychiatric pharmacist, and then changing that path and deciding to do something completely different with it, and, arriving in a completely different place than I think a lot of persons that even take that path end up in overall.
Yeah, and I think also for like entrepreneurship and the drive and the goal setting and the vision for you as now an entrepreneur who's been successful in what you do, I feel like it translates directly into that as well. Like you had to have the discipline for the higher education, but then ultimately to start a successful business and what you've created with the Spirit Pharmacist. One of the things you talked about was the mentors you had in your life. And I'm curious, you mentioned there was a mentor in college when you were on the swim team who was, he'd been there for decades, but he was a real catalyst for you to really dig in and stay focused. And maybe you could mention a little bit about that, and then how has mentors informed your path and direction to become the Spirit Pharmacist?
Yeah, I think that's right. Because I think that like where does success ultimately kind of come from? To sort of discount what I put into it, or like my own kind of drive and hard work and motivation would be to sell myself short. But then to take 100% of credit for that would also be, I think, just grossly inaccurate overall. And so I was really blessed with so many teachers, so many educators, so many coaches in high school, as well as through my undergraduate years, into pharmacy school, after pharmacy school, in residency programs, as I started my career in academic pharmacy, which really saw that level of motivation and drive and saw the goals I wanted to achieve, and literally just volunteered and went out of their way and put their own time into helping me to get there. And I think that's what true mentorship really is overall. It's not a person where there's some kind of transactional exchange where, if you do the work for me, then I will help you, right? It's a person that sort of sees your talent and sees your potential and just wants to foster that and grow that. And so particularly, through high school, like as I was going through those types of years, right, frankly, the swim practices that were just slated for the rest of the swim team just weren't long enough, and they weren't hard enough to equip me with the endurance, with the strength, with the flexibility to get to the place that I wanted to go. And, I distinctly remember, talking with my high school swim coach about, well, I'm going to need to have stronger legs. Like I'm going to need to be able to, have the endurance to kick in this way. And he was like, well, I don't mind coming. I don't. We're supposed to be in the water at 5:45, like 5 days a week, like even in like high school, right? That's morning workout. You have afternoon workouts as well. And I just remember being like, well, you need me to show up at like 5:15, 5:20. We can do like an extra like kick set for extra like 20 minutes before everything else starts, because that's what you're asking for and that's what you want to do, and that's fine with me. And I mean, how many people, first of all, just show up reliably at 5:45 in the morning, 5 days a week, period? And then how many people would go above and beyond to show up 20 minutes, a half hour early sometime for one person, and do that on a regular basis for a number of years, right? So it just sort of, I think it goes to show like how much like help I had along the way, and the credit that those people deserve, and the amazing acts of human service that they exhibited to get me here, right? And yeah, exactly. Like some of it is yourself, but then to take all the credit yourself is just egocentric and wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's when I think about my own path and the mentors I've had, it's so easy to get lost in your own mind with this stuff and your success and your failures. But when you really sort of sit back and look at like who was there in high school, who was there in college, or who was there in life, entrepreneurship too, like who is there, it's like I can see it as well. Like I had a person in high school, I had a really hard time in high school, and there was a woman that just took a liking to me. There was no incentive for her to help mentor me, but she started mentoring me in sophomore year, and it helped me. Shout out to Martha Arapino. She just took me under her wing. She saw like, oh, this guy has potential. He may have low self-esteem or whatever is happening, but I can see his drive, I can see his potential. And she just fostered 3 years of making sure that I was in certain courses, like advanced technology courses through colleges and high school. And then I got certified in Cisco systems, but it was because of her. She's like, you need to do this right now. And they only accepted 8 students into this program senior year. But the point is, she took me under her wing. She didn't have to do that. She didn't get paid. But it's those people in those pivotal moments that really helped to shape. And I'm sure there was probably some business mentors and entrepreneurs or someone to help you to start to think about what you can do as a spirit pharmacist, which I am actually curious because you have created like a super niche, and it's what attracted me to you, to find you and start to utilize your information and share that with the world. Like, what was the catalyst, or who was the person or business, or maybe it was outside of business, that really helped you to shape this vision of the spirit pharmacist?
Yeah, call it serendipity, call it synchronicity, call it just being in the right time in the right place, I think. But frankly, I was just fascinated with psychoactive drugs as a teenager in an intellectual way, which I think is very different than the sort of, I would say, like impulsive experiential curiosity that a lot of teenagers have at that point in time overall. And it was through just reading about different substances that were regulated as illicit compounds mostly, or like had recreational or abuse kind of potential to them, that I really became awakened to the idea that the way that illicit drugs are regulated is not altruistic, it's not on a public health basis, and some compounds that are regulated as illicit substances doesn't even fit closely to the definition of what a drug that should be regulated as an illicit substance is, if you're even of the belief that there should be illegal drugs, period, right, rather than tightly regulated sorts of things that might be even available through legal sorts of prescription routes. So it was really psilocybin and MDMA that I'm kind of like talking about as far as being able to read certain anecdotes or collections of anecdotes and see the trajectory of those types of users or the use of those substances, which led to some level of experiential curiosity, which led to wanting to study, I think, traditional use of peyote through whatever means were available, which is like Native American religion, studies at UC Santa Barbara, wanting to study pharmacology at Santa Barbara because it was like, hey, that's the thing that I'm already interested in learning about, generally speaking. But I mean, this is like 2002 to 2008 or so. So it's really hard to have some kind of vision that there's even a space for, first of all, I didn't even know I wanted to be a pharmacist at that point. And then second of all, like how am I going to have a vision that I'm going to be a pharmacist, that this is what they end up doing at the end of the day? These dogs are just going nuts.
Yeah.
They're really
Maybe
liking this ritual
because it's very important talk. Yeah, they know this is important.
They're exactly. Están feliz, like alegre, right?
Hilarious.
But so there was like that aspect of it that was just like, this is just what I'm interested in. And, you know, of course, I had some really wonderful sorts of eye-opening experiences after the intellectual curiosity. Like there was a well-measured level of experiential curiosity that had kind of followed. But I was really just following the intellectual interest as far as like selecting to go to pharmacy school, taking the path through there overall. And I know I could probably talk about a few other persons and a few other kind of like mentors, but I was in a first year hospital-based pharmacy residency after pharmacy school and learning a lot and also getting really kind of burnt out at the same time. And somebody handed me a flyer, Kim Talion, legendary psychiatric and neurologic pharmacist in the space, rest in peace, she's passed away now. But she handed me a flyer for a second-year residency in psychiatric pharmacy, and something just clicked at that point that the thing that you're interested in now is the thing that you're interested in at age 15 years old, but now you have a bachelor's in pharmacology, a doctorate of pharmacy, a master's in public health. You're about to complete a first-year acute care residency. Maybe you want to follow up with a second-year residency in psychiatric pharmacy. Maybe you want to pursue academia, and maybe you should start writing and speaking about psychedelics, because now this is 2015 or so, right? And so, I mean, Roland Griffiths' seminal article about mystical states of consciousness with psilocybin is published in 2008. You know, S-ketamine or Spravato is actually FDA approved. MDMA is getting breakthrough designations by the FDA because it really seems like a breakthrough therapy for treatment refractory PTSD. Psilocybin has preliminary studies available for depression and anxiety associated with life-threatening illness, for reduction in alcohol use, for quitting smoking or cigarette or tobacco use overall. You know, persons are starting to look at it for treatment-resistant depression. You know, ayahuasca is a thing, and there's pilot data out there with that as well, right? And I could go on about the different sorts of compounds that were there, but it was something like, there's an opportunity for a person that wants it to talk about these in an evidence-based way that balances risks and benefits and doesn't solely focus on abuse potential or harms, because that's not what the data actually reflects at this point in time. And the world just got interested in the thing that I'd always been interested in at about the time that I was becoming a professional and had something to professionally stand on. Mm. And I was just like, I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to run with it. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it seems really curious, the timing and alignment of all of it unfolding. And so that makes a lot of sense. You were coming into your passion and destiny, and then the world was starting to be like, all right, let's look at these things again. They were here, but let's look at them again. And let's look at them, you know, it's very, nowadays, it's like super focused on the therapeutic potential. And there is some focus on mystical, but it's really focused on the therapeutic lens, which is, for my world, coming from, you know, being a former therapist and the people that I've worked with in the space of addiction and mental health, I'm excited for that. I'm excited for that for my own healing with my own nervous system that I've been learning to regulate over decades. But to see the therapeutic potential is very exciting, and it's, you know, it's not the whole picture, but it's really important. So when it comes to that like picture of where psychedelics are heading right now, how do you feel about that, where it's such a focus on the therapeutic, the harm reduction? How is your feeling on that, and what's your take on that whole world of the direction where they're heading?
I mean, I've certainly experienced psychedelics in a number of different environments, at a number of doses, and just a variety of agents out there overall. And like the story that I just told went, like, my curiosity didn't necessarily come because I knew I had treatment-resistant depression at age of 18, and so I need to try psilocybin mushrooms, right? That wasn't where the interest and the sort of enthusiasm and the passion really was even motivated or came from. It was really because public health policy seems broken, and there's something to explore about yourself here, is something to explore about consciousness here that seems like we've been robbed of and denied in really gross ways that violate human rights for a really long period of time now, right? And so I'm really excited about the therapeutic potential of psychedelics, and there's absolutely no way that I could do what I do, create the courses that I courses, give the talks that I give, if we didn't have the foundational clinical safety data and the sort of efficacy information that's coming along with that, if that didn't exist, right? And so I think that the development of psychedelics within an institutional and biomedical paradigm is incredibly important to this movement overall. But then to think that the buck stops there, to think that science is complete without a science and study of just the phenomena of consciousness generally, to think that they should only be available in these incredibly tightly regulated sorts of settings, and not because plants should be free and it's a crime against humanity that they're not. To deny maybe the traditional groups, but the persons that just want to use them as sacraments to explore their own mind and for ritual or religious worshiping based purposes, right? To think that humanity is free when your cognition is trapped by the types of experiences that you're allowed. I mean, those things are just wrong at their core overall. So yes to therapeutic use of psychedelics in institutional paradigms, yes to decriminalized nature, yes to religious freedom, right? Yes to cognitive liberty overall, right? Is really where this movement should be going in an expansive way. And it actually makes me so sad to see persons that are so maybe all in on an institutional therapeutic thing to the point that they're actually against or like trashing these other sorts of use potentials that are frankly way older than their interest in the sort of institutional therapeutic kind of angle of it. And then persons maybe that have different outlooks, more traditional sorts of perspectives around it that are kind of like, well, you know, if you have treatment-resistant depression, then it's just wrong to be able to access it through those therapeutic kinds of channels, right? And so I think that's sort of the difficulty in some ways, is that we really don't have a system that allows drugs to exist at these multiple regulatory categories, right? It's either legal or illegal, right? It's either, you know, some kind of religious sacrament or, right, a drug of abuse, right? And that is just not the truth about psychedelic substances, and it's never been the truth about them, and it's not the truth now. And this is why I think that it is all just incredibly important overall, and the data will set us free eventually. Like, it's going to be impossible to crumble the institutional paradigm of prohibition by saying, I think this works and I think that this is safe, right? We're going to have to prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, probably many times over for a long period of time. And we're kind of getting there, but we've seen it, right? We've seen things almost get to the finish line and then be drawn back and said, well, we need more and we need more and we need more, right? And I think that was a huge blow to the psychedelic movement to not see MDMA-assisted therapy cross the finish line. But maybe it was a little bit naive to kind of think that the FDA, the federal government, the, you know, law enforcement sorts of agencies are all of a sudden going to be like, oh yeah, you did it, and so this is free now, and you can have it within this even institutional type of thing. We probably should have been thinking that there might be a bait and switch at the end, and they might ask for more. And I think, luckily, that's all they've done. They've just said, not yet, we need more, right? Rather than no, outright. That's a bit of a tangential answer, perhaps.
No, I think it's appropriate. It made me think of, this idea of, like, where did these come from? Like, these came from nature. They didn't come from humans, you know, and they were there for us for a reason. Whether you're spiritual or not, they are here, and they do have access to higher consciousness and access to the divine, if that's what we're going to call it, mystical experiences, and to be taken away that freedom to do that is like, it's the craziest thing. And I probably wouldn't have aligned with that in the past because of my own black and white thinking with the world I came from of abstinence, which I think is really important for people. But also, if people don't know the therapeutic and mystical potential of psychedelics, they may not know what they're missing out for 5 years from now, because finally the FDA and finally these entities of control can then say, okay, here's a pass to use therapeutically, which I understand why they're doing that, of course, because they want to reduce harm, they want it controlled. It makes sense. And also, I don't think people realize the amount of potential these have beyond the therapeutic lens, because it's been so focused to be regulated in that way. So I think it's a really important discussion. And also this idea of decriminalizing nature. And so one of the questions I have is what is, when you think about, maybe we should introduce our friends here too, because they're part of the podcast and the interview. So who do we have over here, which maybe we'll bring them on camera?
Well, so I've got this really cute half Chihuahua, half Terrier. That's Sammy Girl. And the big boy, he's kind of up on the hill causing a ruckus
Hunting.
and barking at something over there.
Yeah.
That's Tazito. Yeah, he's our resident Zuguati Costa Rican, half dingo, half domesticated animal that looks like a Tasmanian tiger, right? So that's why he is Taz, or a Tazito overall.
Yeah, it's been fun hanging out with them, especially our beach adventure where we had a little bit of interesting experience with Taz, and I think it was handled appropriately. But yeah, that was a moment on the beach that we had.
Yeah, I absolutely love Costa Rica. It's an incredible and fantastic country overall, and there's so many amazing things, but it is not the same. I mean, first of all, the culture around dogs is so much different, right? You can go to the beach and you can have your dog unleashed, and frankly, most people that bring their dog to the beach do have it unleashed, and it's like the big reunion, play date of all the pups. Right, but they're, frankly, like everywhere in the world, right? And I don't really want to have this discussion and I think have the listeners walk away that it's really much worse here than anybody else. But, there are persons that are traumatized, that are down on their luck, that are trying to make ends meet, and some persons really haven't had the sort of fortune and mentorship to be able to get those ends meet in a truly aligned and integral type of way.
It is Taz,
overall,
the star.
Right? And you can tell how easy it would be for somebody just to whistle and have this guy kind of run over, because he is just a ball of light and just incredibly friendly overall, and just more than anything wants to be incredibly close. And so we had an incident where we were walking back on the beach and we got to my car, and the dark clouds are rolling in. It is the low rainy sort of season here. I mean, this is 5:30 and it's sundown 5:50, 6 o'clock here in Costa Rica. So it's we got about 20 minutes before it gets dark overall. And where is Tazito? He was here, we were walking, but he's not here anymore. So we're, walking back up the beach hey, where is he? Whistling, calling, this and that. And it was actually you that spotted him, and these guys had tied him up. And these guys were then trying to have me buy my own dog back from me again. And, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I just kind of walked up and untied him and was no, this is my dog. I'm going to take him, and it is coming with me. Right. And, I think if it would have been a different scenario, right? They had, maybe he was bothering someone, right? Maybe it would have been appropriate to kind of restrict him in a way that he's not jumping up on some restaurant's table and trying to eat somebody's hamburger or something like that, right? But I suspect that they saw us walking by, they saw that he was with us, he saw it was friendly, they called him up, and then they tried to kind of do something that frankly was a scam, right? Rather than, hey, we saw him walk by and, you know, like we put him on a leash and, you know, we kind of went down the beach like looking for you with him, because frankly, people do also like incredibly nice things like that, like all the time. Like there have been times where I'm broken down with a flat tire. You know, I'm in a place where my car is not starting because the battery is flat. And I've had persons go out of their way to help me in those scenarios. One time when my car battery was flat, because I had, a diesel SUV, you really kind of need it for the terrain around here. Lots of dirt roads, lots of river crossings, like things like that. And we try to jump it with somebody else's car, and it's not working with one set of cables. So it's like, okay, someone else comes, they have another set of cables. We got 2 sets of cables on it now. It's not jumping, right? The guy literally took the good battery out of his car, installed it into my car so that we could jump it and get it started. And once it was running, switch the batteries back again so mine can charge, right? And I mean, they didn't ask for anything for that. Right? I gave them something for it because I was incredibly grateful and appreciative, right? Because I didn't have AAA or roadside service at the time. And so that's the kind of place that it is in some ways, right? And you have persons that maybe are traumatized and opportunistic and will, try to take advantage to make a quick dollar when they can. And then you have incredibly good, big-hearted, and kind people that will do things that are beyond, frankly, what I have ever experienced and would expect anybody in North America to do if they saw a person broken down on the side of the road with a flat car battery or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So that's the Pura Vida for you, right? In a nutshell, and every day is just a new kind of adventure that way.
Yeah, and then look at this. We got Taz coming in right in. He knew we were talking about him. So, yeah, I mean that was a first for me, first experience. And I've since I've been here for the last year, I've had that experience too of like incredible amounts of friendliness and giving and extending beyond the norm, which I was used to back in the States, growing up in the Northeast and New England. And it's not that there's not good people there or any of that, but it's
kind people and nice people.
Yeah,
but
it's just kind of a different Pura Vida vibe. Right. And so that was such an interesting experience to come through that, and then sort of regulating our nervous systems afterwards and then reflecting on it the next day. And so yeah, anyways, that's the adventures, this is the great adventure, coming out here and living here. And one of the questions, living here is beautiful, and there's lots of nature, and there's also lots of different plant medicine opportunities and retreat centers and facilitators. But I think one of the things I'm really curious about is this idea of like the green pharmacy we were talking about. And let's talk a little bit about that. I've never really heard that talked about publicly mentioned. So this idea of, I mentioned decriminalized nature, but like this idea of green pharmacy and organic compounds and coming from nature, but also the synthetic compounds with even like ketamine, yes, it's synthetic, but where is it derived from ultimately is nature. And so what is green pharmacy? Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll explore that.
It's like, I think green pharmacy is actually like yet to be something to be defined like overall, right? I think it's something that we absolutely should be thinking about, but I don't think really is thought about enough. And when I say that, I mean like within the context of like pharmacy school or professional degree programs, or maybe just the pharmaceutical industry at large. And I mean, even the synthetic compounds, right, that we have, 80+% of them are derived from a natural compound, and maybe there's some sort of molecular tweak that they've done to potentially improve tolerability or reduce a side effect profile or make it a longer half-life. So instead of being administered every 4 hours, you can inject it on a weekly basis, right? Like the GLP-1 receptor agonists, like your Ozempic, semaglutide, Wegovy, tirzepatide, Mounjaro, right? Those are examples of that, where it's kind of like the original compound, Exendin, was derived from the saliva of the Gila monster, right? But it's broken down in a very rapid type of fashion overall. And so that was like a really incredible thing to learn about. even in undergrad, doing the bachelor's in science of pharmacology, because a lot of these drug companies have, they can sequence a gene to create a protein, like a receptor, for example, and they may even know the 3D structure of that protein as it sits on a cell membrane, and then they may have, compound libraries of 20 to 100,000 compounds that they can screen against that receptor in hopes of rational drug discovery, yet the number of substances that are actually discovered and brought to the market that way absolutely pale in comparison to the ones that are naturally derived, or the scaffold starts from something that is found in nature overall, right? And so maybe just sort of thinking about like, hey, where do these come from? They come from nature. And like nature is the master chemist. Like nature is the one that has this level of innovation that we can oftentimes, build on the back of to get to something that, depends who you're asking, could be better or worse than the sort of naturally derived sort of product out there. But the reality is that we owe a great level of appreciation as far as where modern medicine is at, not to the genius of humans in rational drug design, but just where they come from naturally overall. But I think in the topic of like green pharmacy, you could probably take it a couple of different directions, right? But okay, like if you are going to create organic compounds through synthesis sorts of reactions in, essentially chemical or chemistry types of plants overall, a lot of the time you're using incredibly strong chemicals to catalyze those types of reactions, incredibly strong acids, incredibly strong bases, and the chemical synthesis creates waste byproducts that are now toxic sorts of chemicals. And so the things that are brought to the market, right, what is the collateral damage, right? What are the hidden costs on the rivers in places like India and China, where most of the pharmaceutical plants are located in the world, right? And what impact does that have on nature after they've given us these incredible sorts of gifts overall, right? When you buy a product from a pharmacy, does it come in a bioorganic bottle or does it come in a plastic prescription bottle? And are you even allowed to reuse your plastic prescription bottle? Or once it's been dispensed from the pharmacy, it could have germs on it, it could be contaminated, somebody could have done something. You can't bring your prescription bottle back and get a refill in that same bottle. It has to be dispensed in a completely new kind of bottle overall. So sort of through and through it, so many layers, from, bench to bedside in the pharmaceutical supply chain, there are just practices that tax nature in ways that probably really aren't great overall. And so thinking about what compounds actually would be reasonable to botanically derive, like, do we absolutely need synthetic psilocybin all the time? Where are we going to get that from? Is it going to be like a chemical synthesis, or is it actually going to be some kind of extraction method that has a much lower impact? With I think like the advent of like bioengineering, essentially, right? Instead of using incredibly strong acids and incredibly strong bases, can we study the enzymes that nature uses to take scaffolds of things, an amino acid like tryptophan, for example, and turn it into something like NN-DMT, right, or 5-MeO-DMT, or psilocybin and psilocin, and psilocin's 4-hydroxy-NN-DMT, right? So they're all DMT analogs in that tryptamine class of family. And could we actually create a supply chain that has zero or no waste to it overall? And I think the answer is yes. And I think that there's persons that are already doing that, but it's just not a widespread industry practice. And right, so I think that yes to modern medicines, and they don't all have to be the exact thing that nature made overall. We should probably do that to the greatest degree that we really can when it seems appropriate. But how do we actually change the bench to bedside industry so that it's environmentally conscious and sustainable, right? And I think that in a nutshell is what green pharmacy is or what green pharmacy should be, and the serious levels of wider discussion that we should be having about this, and educating bright-eyed, bushy-tailed student pharmacists that are coming in. And that's just not something that, there's no course on that. There's no class on that, right? Like if you're lucky, you'll have one professor at some point that mentions it, kind of curbside in an office hour to you or something like that, right? I was lucky. Like somebody did say something like that to me, and it stuck with me, right? It burned in my head as far as like, you're right, and that's a massive problem overall, and it's funky that it's not on a billboard and getting talked about as like a front line headline type of thing.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it to discussion to the forefront, so that this can be talked about more, and this could be even headlining discussions in the future, so that we can ultimately, if we're talking about saving the planet and all these initiatives that we have, it's like, this is a big one, I mean, pharmaceuticals, holy moly, what an industry. And to be able to really understand and derive these from a place of really thinking about the environment and the destruction, but also just keeping it as close to nature as possible, to keep the true essence of what these were brought here for. Humans didn't invent nature and these plants and these compounds and these psychedelics, like nature did. And, then we learned through means of extracting them. But ultimately, I think it's such an important discussion about this idea of green pharmacy. And it's something I want to continue to bring up and talk about. And maybe it's something that maybe you teach in one of your courses someday, as it becomes more acceptable to talk about it, because it seems to me it's already that. And that's why when it came up in our discussion, I was like, oh my God, we have to go there. So that sort of brings me to my next question is, with what you've created and your ecosystem of courses and offerings, I think for people who are listening for the first time, this is a complicated space, psychedelics, utilizing psychedelic assisted therapy for people, because the amount of people on pharmaceuticals, especially in America, is, I think it might be 70% of Americans are on some type of, and it could be much higher, but that's one of the stats I heard, are on some type of medication. So when you're interacting with drugs, psychedelics, that's one we'll label for them, there's contraindications. There's things that can cause serotonin syndrome. There's all different types of effects that can happen that can be harmful. So with all the work that you've done in this ecosystem you've created to consult with doctors and therapists and facilitators, like, what are you most excited about with what you've created to help people to know about contraindications and this really complex, important, because that's really how we met. We met through my training through 5 with Joel and Victoria. I was very grateful to meet you. But then I realized, like, I have family members, friends on SSRIs, antipsychotics, antidepressants. Like, they're not just going to come and do MDMA assisted therapy. They're not just going to come and do ayahuasca. They're going to have to talk about that in the intake screening, which we know sometimes that people don't even have that, which is scary. But what are you most excited about with what you've created and helping people to stay informed about these, SSRIs, antipsychotics, medicines interacting with psychedelic medicines?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of aspects of my work and what I've created that I'm excited about, and I get really positive feedback on just all the time, right? From the sort of blogs and free resources to some of what I would consider like the lower tier sorts of psychedelic pharmacology related courses, all the way to the Psychedelic Pharmacology Master Series and the Psychedelic Screener Mastermind. And I think that's the part of it that I'm most excited about at this moment. It's the newest initiative. It's the most expansive sort of initiative I've done. So, I really started structuring things as far as like, well, I want to give some talks. I want to create some academic blog related articles for persons so that there was more freedom of information around these types of drug interactions and which ones likely are dangerous, which ones might take the edge off or blunt some efficacy, but aren't necessarily likely to be physical safety hazards for persons. And I think that that's kind of where so much of the trust that persons have in me and my website was truly laid down as a foundation. But as the years have gone by, I mean, I just literally got to a place where I couldn't be the architect, visionary, and strategist of my business, as well as the clinical pharmacist that was fulfilling all of the consultation-related requests that I was getting. And I have sort of pulled back from some of the consulting to the extent that I just have another 10 to 20% to be that architect and visionary and strategist again. And took the pre-recorded coursework, the Psychedelic Pharmacology Master Series, a 3-part series that's meant to essentially take a person on an educational journey from foundational pharmacology, psychopharmacology, to understanding the distinct pharmacology of various psychedelic compounds, to how those things interface with mental health, psychotropic medications, other, even more broad medication classes, illness, cardiovascular things, over-the-counter sort of things. And so once I had that 3-part Psychedelic Pharmacology Master Series in place, it was kind of like, now it's time to create some kind of training program, not necessarily to clone me, but to get other persons in a position where their skills and confidence in doing the biomedical screening and assessment that is just an integral piece to safety, preparation, appropriate set and setting around psychedelic experiences is expanded overall. And so I am currently running the second iteration or the second cohort of this Psychedelic Screener Mastermind program, and I've been I've cried several times because of the gratitude for the caliber of applicant and person that's coming into this program, and then what they've expressed back to me as far as their level of appreciation for going through the program and those courses and materials that I've essentially put together over really the last 10 years or so at this point in time. And frankly, there are a lot of fantastic psychedelic training programs out there. You mentioned the 1 through 5 on 5-MeO-DMT with Joelle and Victoria, the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, Synthesis. I've been fortunate to be involved in some others that focus on plant medicines and more like psychospiritual types of uses of psychedelics rather than the kind of purely therapeutic kind of angle overall. And I think a lot of them really are incredibly strong in talking about the psychological sorts of processes with preparation, cultivation of a safe container and set and setting, the integration aspects, right, that are important for persons to, I think, fully realize and optimize the transformative catalyst that the experiences can be for themselves. But so many people have taken 2, 3, 4, 5 of those different training programs sometimes, and they come into the Psychedelic Screener Mastermind and like, this was the piece that was missing. This was the piece that was either minimally discussed or just not discussed to the extent that I walked away feeling confident in that regard or respect. And so this program is filling a unique and critically important kind of niche. And I think that that's why I'm so excited about it, not because it's a redundant competitor to other high quality things in the space, and not because those other programs in the space don't offer absolutely incredible skill sets that are also very important to being a guide, facilitator, psychedelic assisted therapist, journey facilitator or expert, right? But to be able to fill that kind of gap and sort of fill that kind of niche in a way that hopefully gets people rounded out, and then increases the amount of human capital that is truly available to do this biomedical assessment and screening kind of work, because it's just apparent that, you know, I could work 3 times the number of hours that I could, and I really couldn't meet the needs that this space has. And it's truly the Wild West out there right now. It's truly the Wild West as far as how much of that occurs, if it even occurs at all. And so the more people that know about this, the greater the probability of creating a true culture of safety and awareness that keeps the persons that frankly could be desperate and vulnerable, that want to access this modality in perhaps ways that are slightly off of the beaten path, or the ways that they may normally access kinds of things, and really create the best outcomes for them and allow them to do the things that they want to do in truly empowered and informed types of ways, right? Yeah. And so that's why I think that the Psychedelic Screener Mastermind is so important, and why, beyond being the newest sort of initiative I have, is something that I've just been incredibly excited about, like building the community, building the network. It's just been like pinch me. This can't be real. Like I'm living a dream kind of line of work, and it's such a privilege to be able to work with these persons, because they're just such high quality people that truly care, you know.
Yeah, it's a gap, you know. You're solving a problem that is such an important problem to be solved, and I think that's why when I moved to Costa Rica too, I was like, oh, I gotta go visit Ben. But it took me a year to acclimate, as you informed me and sort of mentored me on, to get used to Costa Rica and my nervous system adjusting here. But I was like, oh, I can't wait to meet with Ben, go deeper on your work, because me as a psychedelic concierge, what it's in itself is very new. It's been around, but it's a newer idea of how do I find reputable people of integrity in the space, retreat centers, facilitators, and even persons like you that can help when people need consulting or education in these really important topics of, you know, these medicines that people are on and interacting with, especially in the mental health space, addiction recovery space, you know. And I was really grateful that, you know, I chose Costa Rica and that you were here. It was a 7-hour drive, but it was worth it. And I think what I'm really excited about is, like, this is our first cacao chat session, and there's going to be more cacao chat sessions in person. And as your work continues to, you know, and anyone listening can just go, we'll link your work in the, you know, the episode. But it's just exciting to be where you are, you know, how things are just really flourishing, which makes so much sense for you. And then where I'm at as a psychedelic concierge going, these are the collaborations I want and need to be able to help people to reduce harm as well, which is important. And so, yeah, I'm just excited for our first cacao chat session, one of many, but the first one. And we also had guest appearances from Taz, Sammy, and, you know, I'm excited for what's next.
Well, kudos to you, Jesse, because frankly, it takes a lot just to get in the position where you're going to make a move to go and even just experiment with being an expat in a new place where the culture is different and you're not fluent in the language, like overall, right? And then at the same time, you know, it takes a level of courage and bravery to drive 7+ hours in this country and on these roads by yourself to a person's home, their home turf, with all of their kind of energy that you're sort of feeling out through a couple of conversations that we've had online in a podcast, right? And then to bring this type of opportunity to film these kinds of interviews at the same time. Like namaste, brother. Like that, it's not an easy thing to do in so many ways. And then I mean, what kind of arrival was it, right? I mean, you're coming at what, like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It's pouring rain. It's a gnarly thunderstorm. The lightning has hit a tree and fallen on the power line, so the neighborhood or finca is in total darkness. Overall, it's kind of like, this weekend's going to work well, and I'm going to meet an aligned brother with integrity, and we're really going to hit it off. Or I just entered the den of an axe murderer in total darkness after driving all day long, right? And I think at this point in time, we're discovering it was the former, right?
Yes, I'm alive.
But it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do so many of the things that you've done in the past year, as well as just coming to visit here. So it's been such a blessing to have you, right? You know, for myself, right? Like, again, I'm surrounded and blessed by so many wonderful people and an incredible, particularly like online community that I'm building. But I've kind of been in my own like dark night of the soul with my separation of family, becoming a single father in the last couple of years, being in this country, right? And to say that I've been isolated in things is an exaggeration, right? But to have a person to come into my life and I think share the types of conversations and times that we've had, like, it means a lot to my heart, right? And it does feel like we're really at the beginning of something beautiful unfolding over a long period of time here. So again, just kudos to you for taking the steps and making it happen. Because it's really difficult to land here and then 2 weeks later decide you're going to drive across the country to visit. It just takes time, and I know that, right? And I know that. So thank you so much.
Cheers to you, brother. Thank you for that. And this is definitely one of many more expansive conversations, and who knows what the world and things are going to happen for offerings. And I'm excited for us to continue these and many more to come. So pura vida.
Pura vida. Pura vida, mai.
Thank you for checking out Entrepreneurs of Recovery podcast. We are so appreciative that you are here. Make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe to the show on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes and Spotify so more people can find the show. Once again, thank you so much. We have great episodes and content come out in the future. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed day.